Nicole Kidman filed for divorce from her husband of 19 years.
After nearly 2 decades together, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's love story has come to an end, and the way it unraveled has left fans stunned. From the outside, they looked untouchable. Red carpet smiles, heartfelt tributes, and the kind of chemistry that made people believe they had beaten the odds of Hollywood and fame. But when Nicole finally stepped into the spotlight after filing for divorce, one thing became painfully clear: the fairy tale was over, and the truth was far more complicated than anyone imagined. What followed wasn't silence, but a storm. Keith poured his emotions into raw, unfiltered performances that revealed a man in turmoil, while Nicole met the moment with quiet strength, choosing her actions over public words. This wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was a collision of love, fame, sacrifice, and private battles that no red carpet could ever conceal. If stories like this fascinate you, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, because to truly understand how it all ended, we need to go back to where it began. Long before Nicole Kidman became one of the world's most recognized actresses, she was just a shy little girl trying to find her voice. Born in Honolulu in 1967 while her Australian parents were living abroad, Nicole's childhood was full of contrasts. Her father, a psychologist and biochemist, brought intellect and discipline into the home, while her mother, a nurse and educator, nurtured empathy and creativity. When the family eventually returned to Sydney, Nicole's personality was already taking shape, but not in the way most people would imagine for a future Hollywood icon. Far from confident, Nicole was painfully shy. Teachers remembered how she would blush so intensely when called on in class that she could barely speak. Public speaking terrified her. But what she lacked in confidence, she made up for in imagination. Ballet became her first form of escape, followed by drama classes and eventually community theater, where she discovered that on stage, her shyness disappeared. Acting gave her permission to express emotions she could never say out loud. By her teenage years, her natural talent was impossible to ignore. Australia's film and television industry was growing rapidly, and Nicole seized every opportunity. She appeared in commercials, television movies, and at just 16, she landed a role in the cult classic BMX Bandits. Her tall frame, porcelain skin, and expressive eyes made her stand out, and it wasn't long before Hollywood took notice. When the American film industry came calling, Nicole was suddenly living the dream she'd always imagined. But even as success followed, she wasn't immune to the darker side of fame. The once timid girl who feared speaking in class now faced constant scrutiny and impossible expectations. She had to balance ambition with vulnerability, a struggle that would define much of her life. That vulnerability shaped every choice she made, both professionally and personally. While audiences were falling in love with a rising star, Nicole was still searching for love, for family, for a place where she truly belonged. And that search would soon lead her into a relationship that would give her everything she thought she wanted: prestige, passion, and partnership, but also heartbreak, isolation, and emotional scars she would carry for decades. But before Keith Urban ever entered her life, another man had already changed it forever. By the late 1980s, Nicole Kidman's career was skyrocketing. Hollywood had taken notice of her striking performances, and it was during this rise that she met one of the biggest stars on the planet, Tom Cruise. Their chemistry was immediate. In 1990, they married and quickly became one of the most glamorous couples in the world. Tabloids couldn't get enough of them. They were young, beautiful, and seemed untouchable. For Nicole, who had grown up shy and uncertain of herself, being alongside one of Hollywood's most powerful men felt like living inside a dream. But behind that perfect image was a far more complicated truth. Tom was deeply devoted to Scientology, a controversial faith that soon became a powerful force within their marriage. For Nicole, that presence was suffocating. Though she rarely spoke publicly about it, reports and later commentary suggested that the pressures and control tied to the religion strained their relationship. The deepest wound came after their split in 2001. Nicole and Tom had adopted 2 children, Isabella and Connor, and after the divorce, the children primarily lived with Tom. Public accounts over the years suggested a painful distance formed between Nicole and her kids, something she almost never discussed, yet which clearly left deep scars. For a woman who had always longed for stability and family, that separation was devastating. The end of her marriage to Tom was not just a personal heartbreak, it was a defining trauma. Nicole carried herself with grace in public, never letting the world see her pain, but the emotional toll was undeniable. Those years shaped her views on love, family, and resilience. So when she later met Keith Urban, it was no coincidence that she longed to rebuild what had once been broken. Her past made her more determined to hold on to the new sense of love and home she found with him. Keith Lionel Urban's path couldn't have been more different. Born in Whangarei, New Zealand, in 1967, he moved with his family to Queensland, Australia, at a young age. His father, Bob, ran a convenience store but loved country music, a passion that soon became Keith's own. By age 6, he was already playing guitar, performing at small-town shows not far from home. Life at home wasn't always easy. Financial strain and family tension gave Keith a restless edge early on. Music became his escape, but it was also his only shot at a better life. He dropped out of school and threw himself into performing bars, talent shows, anywhere that would let him play. There was no backup plan. That risk paid off. After years of hustling, Keith released his self-titled American debut album in 1999, and overnight, he became one of country music's brightest stars. With tousled hair, piercing blue eyes, and a guitar that seemed like an extension of his soul, he captured hearts everywhere. But fame brought darkness too. By his 20s, Keith was already struggling with addiction, first to alcohol, then to more dangerous substances. The spotlight didn't calm him, it magnified the chaos. By the time he met Nicole in 2005, Keith had already been through rehab more than once. On stage, he was magnetic. Off stage, he was at war with himself. Behind the charm and confidence was a man terrified that his demons could destroy everything: his career, his relationships, even his future. That vulnerability was part of what drew Nicole to him. She saw beyond the fame, into the pain. She understood what it meant to look perfect on the outside while falling apart inside. Both had known heartbreak, both had faced their own private battles, and when they met, it felt like two broken pieces finally fitting together. But as their story would later prove, that same emotional intensity that made their love so powerful would also make it fragile. The passion that united them would eventually become the source of their deepest struggles. Quick reminder, if you're enjoying this, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. By the early 2000s, Nicole Kidman had rebuilt her life after the wreckage of her marriage to Tom Cruise. She had won an Academy Award for The Hours and was celebrated as one of Hollywood's most respected actresses. Yet behind all the success, she still craved something real: love, stability, and a second chance at the family she'd lost. Keith Urban, meanwhile, was on a meteoric rise in Nashville. His heartfelt lyrics and electrifying performances were making him one of the most sought-after names in country music. But fame couldn't quiet the storm inside him. His ongoing struggle with addiction haunted every success. When Nicole and Keith finally crossed paths in 2005, both stood at pivotal points in their lives, two souls shaped by pain, success, and a longing for redemption. Fate didn't just bring them together, it gave them a shot at healing what life had broken. That fateful meeting took place at the Day USA Gala in Los Angeles in January 2005, an event honoring Australians who had made their mark in America. Nicole, elegant and poised, was one of the evening's brightest stars. Keith, with his quiet charm and rising fame, was the country musician everyone was beginning to notice. When they were introduced, Nicole later admitted she wasn't sure he was even interested. He was polite but distant, and though he took her number, he didn't call for months. What could have ended before it began turned into a quiet waiting game. Then, when Keith finally reached out, something clicked instantly. From that moment, their connection deepened quickly. By May, They were spotted together in public, and by the end of the year, Nicole was openly describing him as the man who had swept her off her feet. What she saw in Keith was unlike anything she'd known before. Where Tom Cruise had been polished, controlled, and tightly guarded, Keith was raw, passionate, and unfiltered. He wasn't perfect, and that imperfection was exactly what drew Nicole in. To her, he represented freedom and authenticity. To him, she represented grace, stability, and validation, a symbol that he had truly arrived, not just in music but in life. By late 2005, it was obvious to both of them, and to the press watching closely, that this was more than a fleeting romance. It was the union of two worlds, two lives, and two wounded souls who believed they'd finally found redemption in each other. And by mid-2006, they were ready to make it official. If their meeting felt like fate, their wedding looked like a fairy tale. On June 25, 2006, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban married in a breathtaking ceremony at the Cardinal Soretti Memorial Chapel on Sydney's Manly Peninsula. The event was lavish yet deeply personal, attended by Hollywood royalty, country music icons, and their closest loved ones. Nicole wore a Balenciaga gown with a sweeping veil, walking down the candlelit aisle while holding back tears. Keith, with his signature long hair and guitar in hand, serenaded her at the reception, adding a raw, romantic touch that melted hearts. For the media, it was the perfect storybook ending, Hollywood elegance meeting country grit. The photos splashed across magazines worldwide told a story of redemption. Nicole had found unconditional love, and Keith had found stability in the arms of one of the world's most admired actresses. Together, they were hailed as the golden couple of Hollywood and Nashville. To fans, their marriage wasn't just another celebrity love story, it was a testament to love's ability to heal. Nicole, after the heartbreak of losing her first marriage and enduring separation from her children, finally seemed at peace. Keith, who had battled addiction and self-doubt, appeared to have found his anchor. But fairy tales rarely stay perfect. Beneath the soft glow of candlelight and music, cracks were already forming. Just 4 months after the wedding, Keith would check himself into rehab for alcohol abuse, a devastating blow to their newlywed bliss and the first public fracture in their carefully crafted fairy tale. Still, at that moment, their wedding stood as a symbol of hope and renewal, two souls, both shaped by struggle, vowing to walk forward together. The world believed in their story. And perhaps, for a while, they believed in the fairy tale too. But reality has a way of testing even the most beautiful beginnings. Only 4 months after their dreamlike wedding, the cracks in Nicole and Keith's marriage became impossible to ignore. In October 2006, Keith voluntarily checked himself into rehab for alcohol abuse. For many couples, such a revelation so soon after marriage would have been shattering. For Nicole, it was a test of loyalty, and she chose to face it head-on. The timing couldn't have been worse. Nicole had barely finished sending out thank-you notes from the wedding when the tabloids pounced on the story. Overnight, the image of the golden couple turned darker. Headlines painted Keith as a man on the edge and Nicole as a woman who had married into chaos. Yet she refused to let the world define her marriage. Instead, she stood by him, visiting him during treatment, avoiding the press, and protecting their privacy with quiet determination. Keith would later credit Nicole with saving his life, calling her steadfast support his anchor. To him, her presence wasn't just love, it was survival. But behind the scenes, things were more complicated. Nicole, unable to save her marriage to Tom Cruise, threw herself into the role of healer with Keith. It wasn't only about love, it was about redemption. She wanted to prove to herself that she could hold her family together this time. The public saw resilience. Fans admired them even more, believing their marriage had survived its first major trial. But privately, a pattern was beginning to form. Nicole's role as caretaker and Keith's as the one who needed saving became central to their dynamic. For a while, it worked. Yet that imbalance carried a cost neither fully understood at the time. For now, though, they emerged stronger in the public eye, united, defiant, and ready to face the world. Soon, however, they'd confront even greater challenges: the relentless tug-of-war between demanding careers, parenthood, and the unblinking gaze of fame. In the years following Keith's rehab stay, the couple fought hard to rebuild their lives. Outwardly, they seemed unstoppable. Nicole continued to dominate Hollywood, taking on both sweeping epics like Australia and intimate, emotional roles like Rabbit Hole, which earned her critical acclaim. Keith solidified his place as one of country music's leading figures, winning Grammys, topping charts, and selling out arenas across the world. Publicly, their love story appeared stronger than ever. Interviews often showed Keith praising Nicole with teary-eyed gratitude, calling her his inspiration and rock. To outsiders, they looked unbreakable, a couple who had weathered the storm and emerged even more devoted. But behind the scenes, the pressures of fame, distance, and the unending scrutiny of the public would continue to test them in ways neither fame nor love could fully protect them from. Nicole once described Keith as the man who had brought her back to life. Their chemistry on red carpets and at award shows made it seem as if their bond had only deepened over the years. But beneath that flawless image, the pressures of fame were quietly eroding their foundation. The first challenge was distance. With Nicole filming across the world and Keith constantly on tour, long separations became inevitable. They set rules, like never being apart for more than a few weeks, but insiders whispered that their schedules clashed more often than they admitted. For Nicole, who still carried the pain of being separated from her adopted children with Tom Cruise, the fear of losing family time lingered like a shadow. When the couple welcomed their daughters Sunday Rose in 2008 and Faith Margaret in 2010, Nicole poured herself into motherhood. Determined not to repeat past mistakes, she clung fiercely to the stability of family life. Keith adored his children, but the transition to fatherhood wasn't seamless. The restless rhythm of a touring musician didn't blend easily with the structure Nicole sought. She valued order. He thrived on spontaneity. That difference, while subtle, often put them at odds. Still, in public, they looked like the antidote to Hollywood cynicism, a couple who had defied the odds. Photos of Nicole holding her daughters at airports while Keith handled luggage became snapshots of an idealized partnership. They projected unity, but those close to them knew the truth. Fame, family, and personal struggles were slowly wearing them down. Behind closed doors, their marriage had become a constant negotiation between distance and closeness, duty and freedom, stability and chaos. While the world believed they were unbreakable, the seeds of conflict had already been planted. Through the late 2000s and 2010s, Nicole and Keith perfected their public image. Red carpet appearances, heartfelt speeches, and family portraits painted them as Hollywood's rare example of lasting love. Interviewers called them proof that marriage could survive fame, addiction, and distance. Nicole often said Keith had brought her back to life, while Keith tearfully thanked her in award show speeches. To fans, their story was more than romance. It was reassurance that true love still existed. But behind that glow, a different truth was unfolding. The very traits that drew them together began to divide them. Nicole, shaped by loss, longed for consistency and calm. Keith, restless by nature, chased freedom and excitement. Their differences weren't explosive, they were quiet, persistent tensions that slowly drained the intimacy between them. Friends whispered that Nicole sometimes felt she carried the emotional weight of the relationship, while Keith resented always being cast as the one in need of rescue. He admired her strength, but sometimes felt diminished by it. She loved his vulnerability, but feared it could undo what they'd built. Their marriage became a push and pull, one striving for peace, the other resisting control. Parenthood magnified those differences. Nicole valued boundaries and stability, hoping to shield her daughters from the chaos of fame. Keith became the fun parent, looser, more spontaneous. The girls adored both, but insiders claimed Nicole sometimes felt undermined, while Keith felt judged. Publicly, though, they remained flawless. Every smile, touch, and affectionate glance reinforced the illusion. They were Hollywood's golden couple, proof that fairy tales could survive. But as history often shows, Fairy tales are easier to perform than to live, and by the mid-2010s, the cracks were starting to show. By the mid-2010s, whispers about their marriage grew louder. Tabloids speculated about clashing schedules, Keith's nightlife, and Nicole's intensity. Paparazzi photos fueled the rumors, Nicole attending events without Keith, or Keith spotted without his wedding ring. Each time, they responded with poise. "We've never been stronger," Nicole told interviewers calmly, her tone practiced but firm. Keith echoed her words, calling her his rock and the love of his life. On red carpets, they clasped hands tightly, smiling as if to silence the noise. For years, it worked. Fans wanted to believe in them, and many did. But those close to the couple saw the truth. Nicole appeared weary, drained by her role as the stabilizer. Keith grew frustrated with being seen as dependent. Observers noticed subtle changes. Nicole's once effortless smiles became practiced. Keith's declarations of love started sounding rehearsed rather than spontaneous. Their affection wasn't fake, it was simply sustained by effort rather than ease. Despite growing tension, they clung to the illusion. Every kiss, every shared laugh became part of the mythology they'd built. But behind closed doors, exhaustion was setting in. By 2023 and 2024, rumors reached their peak. Reports claimed they were living separate lives, and photos of them attending events alone only reinforced it. Yet they denied it all until they couldn't anymore. In September 2025, the truth finally broke. Nicole Kidman filed for divorce in Davidson County, Tennessee, ending nearly 2 decades of marriage. The filing was brief and clinical, irreconcilable differences, but those words carried the weight of 20 years of love, loss, and endurance. According to People, they had already been living apart for months. The fairy tale had quietly ended long before the world knew. For fans, the news was devastating, a reminder that even Hollywood's strongest couples can fracture under the pressure of reality. For Nicole, the decision wasn't sudden. Sources say she wrestled with it for months, torn between loyalty to her family and her own emotional survival. Friends described her as heartbroken but resolute, a woman who realized she could no longer be both partner and caretaker. For years, she had anchored the relationship. In the end, she chose to save herself. The filings revealed practical terms. Nicole requested primary residential custody of their daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, with Keith sharing joint decision-making rights. Both waived spousal and child support, a sign of independence and mutual respect. Even with calm paperwork and polite statements, the emotional fallout was far from quiet. The world gasped. Fans who had believed in their story felt betrayed. The couple, once seen as proof that love could endure fame, had become a reminder of a harder truth. Sometimes, even love isn't enough to keep two people together. The tabloids wasted no time framing the split as a tragedy. Nicole as the woman who'd finally had enough, and Keith as the troubled artist undone by his demons. But while Nicole's decision to file was deliberate and restrained, Keith's response would be anything but subtle. Just days later, he walked onto a stage without his wedding ring, turning what should have been a concert into a raw, public reckoning. And for the first time, his music spoke louder than any official statement ever could. Only days after news of the divorce broke, Keithurban took the stage in Pennsylvania for another stop on his High and Alive world tour. But this wasn't a standard country performance. It became a window into a man processing heartbreak in real time. From the moment he appeared without his wedding ring, fans sensed this night would be different. They were right. The most talked about moment came during his 2004 breakup anthem, "You'll Think of Me." Traditionally, the lyric goes, "Take your space and take your reasons." But that night, he delivered a sharp variation, "Take your unreasonable reasons." Clips spread quickly online, with many interpreting it as a pointed reference to Nicole and the divorce. Even more telling were the changes to his set list. According to Yahoo Entertainment, Keith omitted The Fighter, a 2016 song widely believed to have been inspired by Nicole, and one he'd often performed with her in mind. The omission, paired with the altered lyric, fueled speculation that Keith was deliberately rewriting his musical history to reflect the end of his marriage. TMZ also reported on the concert, noting that while Keith hadn't completely dropped certain songs, the way he curated his set list that night sparked serious discussion. Some fans saw it as catharsis. Others called it bitterness. But everyone agreed it wasn't just another show. Yet, amid the tension, there were flashes of tenderness. During Heart Like a Hometown, images of Keith with his daughters appeared on the screen, a reminder that family remained at the core of his story, even as his marriage crumbled. For audiences, the night felt like more than a concert. It was part confession, part therapy session, and part cultural spectacle. Every lyric change and set list choice was dissected online, cementing the idea that Keith's music had become the most honest statement he could make. While Keith's grief played out under stadium lights, Nicole Kidman chose a very different path. Instead of public outbursts or lyrical revisions, she let silence and subtle gestures tell her story. Just weeks after the filing, Nicole appeared at a film festival without her wedding ring. Her dress was elegant, her posture poised, but her expression carried a quiet sadness that even her grace couldn't disguise. This was how Nicole handled heartbreak, not through spectacle, but through composure. Her focus shifted immediately to her daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret. Paparazzi captured her walking hand in hand with them through the streets of Nashville, her protective body language making it clear where her priorities lay. Friends described her as retreating into family life, determined not to let the chaos of divorce disrupt her daughter's sense of stability. For Nicole, the moment carried echoes of her past. Years earlier, her divorce from Tom Cruise had left her estranged from her adopted children, Isabella and Connor, a wound that never fully healed. This time, she was determined not to let history repeat itself. Reports indicated she sought primary custody of Sunday and Faith, focusing on giving them continuity as the marriage dissolved. Professionally, she turned to what she could control, her work. She appeared at industry events with her usual professionalism, her career thriving even as her personal life shifted. But the contrast between her quiet poise and Keith's emotional performances only made their differences more pronounced. Nicole's silence became powerful in its own right. Where Keith's songs shouted, her calm demeanor whispered resilience. She didn't need to alter lyrics or make public declarations. Her message was clear. She was moving forward, not with bitterness, but with clarity, devoted to her daughters, her work, and her own peace. And in many ways, that quiet strength spoke louder than any song ever could. In the end, the story of Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban isn't just about a marriage that ended, it's about what it revealed along the way. For nearly 2 decades, they carried the weight of being Hollywood and Nashville's golden couple, symbols of love conquering fame, distance, and addiction. And for a long time, it looked like they had done the impossible. But behind the smiles and red carpets were 2 people shaped by old wounds, trying to heal each other while carrying their own scars. Nicole, marked by the pain of losing her adopted children, longed for stability. Keith, haunted by addiction and restlessness, longed for freedom. Their love was genuine, but so were their contradictions. And over time, those contradictions became too heavy to bear. The divorce papers cited irreconcilable differences, but the truth was far more layered. It wasn't one scandal or one argument that ended their marriage, it was years of imbalance, quiet sacrifices, and emotional negotiations that eventually broke under their own weight. What makes their story so compelling isn't just its collapse, but the contrast in how they faced it. Keith turned heartbreak into art, performing his pain before thousands. Nicole turned inward, finding strength in her daughters and her silence. One processed through expression, the other through grace. For fans, their separation was bittersweet. It shattered the illusion of a perfect love story, but it also reminded the world that even the brightest stars are human. Behind the glamour, they wrestle with the same things everyone does: love, loss, and the search for balance. And perhaps the truest insight lies in Nicole's own words: it's not about perfection. It's about showing up again and again. For nearly 20 years, she and Keith did exactly that. But sometimes, showing up isn't enough. Sometimes love, no matter how deep, just isn't built to last forever. What do you think about their story? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, tap subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss our next deep dive.